Hello, once again, this is Pastor Phil Fernandes of Trinity Bible Fellowship, and we're going through the Bible, and we're on book number 6, uh, Joshua. The author of the book of Joshua was Joshua. He wrote it between 1405 and 1390 BC. Joshua means Yahweh is salvation. Yeshua would be the way it would, close to the way it's pronounced. That's actually Jesus' name, Yeshua. And here Joshua conquers, and Jesus' name is Yeshua, and he is the one who conquered the grave for us. And the theme of the book of Joshua is conquering the promised land. And in chapter 1, the Jews are preparing to enter the promised land. And so the first two verses there, Joshua 1, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke to Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, over the Jordan River, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them, the children of Israel. And God tells him in verses 8 and 9, this book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate in it day and night, that you may be observed to do according to all that is written in it, for then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have success. And so God encourages the Jews as they prepare to enter the promised land. In chapter 2, Joshua, he learned the hard way. Moses sent 12 spies, and only Joshua and Caleb, who were young men at the time, 40 years earlier, came back with a good report. So he finds two really godly men and sends two godly spies into the promised land. And Rahab the harlot has to hide them. She, for 40 years, the people in the land of Canaan, the promised land, have been hearing about the Jews conquering people all over the place. So even though the Jews were regular-sized people and there were a lot of giants in the promised land, many of the people were afraid of the God of Israel and afraid of his people. And so Rahab the harlot decided to align herself with the God of Israel, with Yahweh, and she saved the lives of two Israelite spies and lied to the Canaanite officials. And because of that, they were rescued by the Jews when they conquered the promised land. In chapter 3, there's the miraculous crossing of the Jordan River. God has the priests go first with the Ark of the Covenant, and the Jordan River dries up and they walk across on dry land. Chapter 4, they set up 12 memorial stones, one for each of the 12 tribes of Israel, stones that they took out of the dried up Jordan River, and when the water closed back up on the side there, they planted the memorial stones kind of as an altar of remembrance to the Lord. And then the new generation is circumcised in chapter 5. Only that first generation that came out of Egypt had been circumcised. So Joshua is told by the Lord to circumcise that next generation. And in verses 13 to 15, the captain of the Lord of hosts appears and tells Joshua to take off his sandals, for he's standing on holy ground, and Joshua worships him. So it's the pre-incarnate Christ appearing to Joshua to encourage him before the battle. Now, chapters 6 through 12 is conquering the promised land. It was a divide and conquer strategy. Originally, they would have gone up through Kadesh Barnea, but that's when the spies came back with a bad report. We're like grasshoppers before them. There's giants in the land. We don't stand a chance. And only Joshua and Caleb came back with a good report. They came from the south there. This time they're coming right in the middle through Jericho. And so by conquering the middle, then you protect your ground, and then you can go and conquer the southern kingdom first, and then the northern kingdom after that. So it's a divide and conquer strategy, so you don't have to fight all the different people groups at one time. And so the central portion of Canaan is conquered when Jericho is conquered, and God commanded the Jews, with the priests leading the way and the blowing of trumpets. They were to march around the city once a day for 6 days, but on the seventh day they were to march around the city and the walls of Jericho 7 times. And then at the end they were all to shout, the trumpets were to blast. The people inside Jericho, they were terrified. They heard stories about the Jews and their God for the past 40 years. They were terrified with all this sound, and then the trumpets blasting and people shouting, and then the walls of Jericho just miraculously crumbled, and then Jericho was conquered. Then they go to defeat Ai, and they get defeated by Ai. And so Joshua realizes someone must have disobeyed the Lord, and it was Achan, and his family had stole some of the spoils, and so they were executed. In chapter 7, God told them not to take any of the spoils. And then the rematch with Ai, the Jews were attacking the city, and then they pretended to flee, to retreat, just like they had the first time, but they had a whole group waiting in ambush, and so as they evacuated the city, other Jews went, and then the Ai went after them, chased after the Jews, and then the Jews that took control of the city burnt it down. So then the warriors of Ai saw the city was on fire, so they turned around to head back. Well, the Jews that had been fleeing started chasing them now, turned around and started chasing them, and then they got ambushed from the side, and Ai was devastated. Then a treaty is made with the Gibeonites in chapter 9. The Gibeonites saw the writing on the wall. They thought, man, we're never going to beat the Israelites. Their God is too powerful. They're worshiping local deities, all these other nations, and these guys got smart. They said, man, we can't beat them. We don't have time to flee. Let's put dirt all over our faces and act like we were just traveling through. And so God was saying, wipe out all these inhabitants of the promised land. Well, they said, well, we're not from the promised land. We're just traveling through. We're nomadic people. We're just traveling through. Well, they were lying, but they fooled Joshua and the Israelites, and they said, you know what? We'll surrender to you. Just make us your servants. And so Joshua made a treaty with them before he found out that, they weren't really just traveling through. But whatever the case, they held to their word with the Gibeonites until King Saul, generations later, which was a really big mistake. But whatever the case, so the southern kingdoms, the southern kings of Canaan gather at Gibeon, which the Gibeonites had evacuated, and Joshua does battle. The Israelites do battle with these southern kings of the land of Canaan in chapter 10. That's where they're defeating them. The Israelites are defeating them in battle, and Joshua prays that the sun would stand still, and God causes the sun to stand still there so that they'd have enough sunlight to defeat the southern kings. Then the northern kings are defeated at Meron in chapter 11. A summary of the conquered kings is given in chapter 12. And then in chapters 13 through 22, the promised land is divided among the 12 tribes. You can get a map of Israel and see how it was divided, into the 12 tribes. And Joshua gives his last message in chapters 23 and 24. He tells the Jews, he said, look, you can either worship the false gods that your fathers worshipped on the other side of the Euphrates River when Abraham was called out of there, or you can worship the false gods of the Egyptians or the false gods of the wilderness that we wandered through, or you can serve the Lord. And then he said in Joshua 24:15, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And that was his farewell address. He lived to be 110 years old, and until his death and the death of the elders that were his contemporaries, until their deaths, the Jews remained faithful to God. But after he died, then everything went downhill. They took the bones of Joseph, which they had taken out of Egypt, and through the 40 years of wilderness wandering, and they buried it in the promised land. And so that's how the book of Joshua ends. But they conquered the promised land, but there's still pagans living there. They're told not to intermarry with them, not to worship the false gods of the pagans. But things didn't turn out well. We're going to see in the book of Judges where Israel is kind of a divided kingdom, and they have judges ruling over them. Sometimes judges ruled over parts. A time, no king in Israel, each man do his right in his own eyes. Time of moral anarchy. But that's the book of Joshua there, and we'll pick it up with Judges in the next mini lecture on the Phil Fernandes Show. Please subscribe to the Phil Fernandes Show. You can reach us at Trinity Bible Fellowship, P.O. Box 3264. That's 3264, Bremerton, Washington 98310. You can also visit us at philfernandez.org or sermonaudio.com/IBD. And that sermonaudio.com/IBD, 11 o'clock Sunday mornings Pacific Standard Time. You can watch my sermons live on Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. God bless you, everybody. Just keep the faith and be safe.